All righty. And with the announcements out of the way, I think we can pass things over to Cynthia to introduce herself and give us a lovely presentation about managing water in the gardens.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and thanks for allowing me to come and share with you this morning. The presentation I'm going to give is how to manage water that excess water in your garden. I decided to give this presentation based on my own personal experience and based on some presentation material that was available to the Master Gardener group that I wanted to share with you. I've been with the Master Gardeners for just over a year now, and they have helped me to learn so much, to try to meet the challenges that I've encountered in my own personal gardening. I've enjoyed being able to interact with the public, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to meet with all of you. So I see there's a few Master Gardener friends out there in the audience, so you guys cheer me on. I'm going to do the best I can. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and thanks, Blake, for the great introduction and getting us started. Okay. Why is this important to us? It is important because water management is important for every homeowner. Some of you have situations that are pretty normal. You don't have too much runoff coming from your yards. Your yard drains pretty nicely in the front and in the back. But even if you don't have any specific problems, you should know that polluted stormwater runoff is the #1 threat to North Carolina water quality. We have beautiful, beautiful resources in the state of North Carolina. We have beautiful lakes. Jordan Lake is amazing. We have beautiful waterways. Falls Lake is gorgeous. Of course, we have the beautiful coast that we almost take for granted because we're just so used to it. But 1/3 of the polluted runoff comes from urban areas. So we don't think of it so much as the suburban areas. It comes from the urban areas. And that's because there's so much impervious surfaces. Of course, we have roofs just like everyone else does in all the other areas. But there's such a high density of roads, driveways, and parking lots. And so as you see from this photo on the right, this is an example of a really bad situation where there's a lot of runoff that's coming off these impervious surfaces. Runoff results in flooding. As you can see, this is a nasty situation here on the right, same picture. It ends up with erosion. So some of that ground that would be holding its own ends up being eroded, and some of the nutrients that would be in that ground is being torn away. And instead of something being able to grow nicely, you're going to have some sediment forming there, and also what's going to be able to grow there is just going to be the worst stuff possible. Contamination and pollutants, examples of those are from cars. We're going to get antifreeze that drips onto into your driveways or into the parking lots. There's going to be grease that's going to be dripping from cars, and of course, there's going to be oil that drips, and we see some dripping from cars. When you move from one parking space to another, you might see the oil or grease. Actually, sometimes you can see on the highway when you're driving after it's rained a little bit, you can see the oil and the grease circles on the highway, and it becomes very slick. You can also see heavy metals that are dripping from cars. From our homes and businesses, there's going to be fertilizers. I know that we use fertilizers on our homes, but of course, businesses especially those that are trying to take care of large properties, are going to have fertilizers. There's going to be pesticides and other chemicals, just trying to maintain properties so that they look great. And bacteria from pet waste and failing septic systems. Ew. What can a homeowner do? Lots of things that they can do. If you have a situation where excess runoff is a problem for you, and I encounter the problem with excess runoff in my own property. My husband and I downsized a few years ago, and we moved to a property that had a sloping backyard. At the time, the sloping backyard didn't seem to be a problem because there was beautiful junipers on that back slope. And the property seemed dry. It was lovely. We're so excited about it. The previous property that we owned, the drainage was downhill and we didn't have a problem at all, but we encountered some new things when we moved to our new property. And that was a journey for us that started in what are we going to do? So our neighbor actually is currently putting in a French drain to try to drain some of the excess stormwater off of their property. That French drain is going to be very expensive. So homeowners that do have a problem can put in a French drain to drain the water away from their property towards public drain. You can save some of the roof water in rain barrels or cisterns and tanks, as you see a photo there to the top right, where someone's got a very large cistern or tank that they're using for their garden use. Or you can use a rain barrel. Many municipalities offer rain barrels at reduced prices. If you decide to get your own rain barrel to collect the rainwater off of your roof, you can get those and there are videos. I think Carrie has a video that will show you how to take your gutter and to modify your gutter to collect that rain barrel. They'll suggest a type of rain barrel that will make sure to filter out the what's coming off of your roof that doesn't go into your rain barrel and contaminate the water in your rain barrel. I'll show you maybe how to configure that rain barrel so it's lifted a little bit off the ground so that you can get some water pressure and use some of that water to maybe water in your garden. I actually have mine located next to my vegetable garden so I can get some water into my vegetable garden and also into my perennial flower garden. You can use pervious surface materials that allows water to pass through in the landscape. As you see in this picture that's below, someone has landscaped a path with stones, very, very lovely. You can see that the water is draining down into that stones, but they've created enough of the stone path that allows the water to drain, but they can still walk across that path because it's a pervious surface. Or you can use rain chains, as you see in that bottom right configuration. The thing about the rain chains is you have to make sure to modify your gutter, and that becomes a little bit complicated. You're going to modify that gutter to collect the rain. The rain will make its way down that rain chain, and you need to make sure that wherever it's draining to does not become flooded. So you have to be very careful with the configuration. It's not just to put a little ornamental rain chain up. It's a little bit more complicated than just grab something. Homeowners can collect stormwater in ponds and wetlands. And for those of us that have areas in our yards that are natural ponds or wetlands, that's wonderful. Of course, we have to maintain those. And the caption that you see at the top left there is someone has installed a pond. You see the wildlife that's in the second caption. I think it's a bunch of turtles there that are in the pond area. There's a beautiful, beautiful pond there in the top right, and a beautiful wetland with wildlife in that very, very far top right. Or you can create a rain garden, which is what you see captioned at the very bottom right, which is what we're going to talk more about today. Okay, you see a picture of a beautiful rain garden here. You can see the water is draining down towards a sloped oval area here. You see what looks like a bunch of lambs here, a bunch of perennials that are planted here in the bottom left. And in the bottom right, you see an area that's mostly shrubs and other trees. Looks like some kind of red bud. I'm not positive, but it's an area that has lots of shrubs. It's got a lot of mulch that is capturing the excess water, excess runoff water. And you can see that's being used to try to maintain a dry area in the lawn to try to capture that excess runoff stormwater. What are the benefits of a rain garden? It helps you increase that water retention, some of that water that is coming into your yard as a homeowner. It's going to reduce that runoff and it's going to decrease that soil erosion, because the last thing you want is for your soil to be depleted, that you can't plant anything in it. And it just looks like a hot mess, sometimes a trail of just rain, the rain just running off into your property. You want to also decrease that sediment buildup, which is just not attractive at all. It's going to allow those plants to manage the excess fertilizer and pesticides naturally. And it creates a beautiful habitat for butterflies and birds. You can see the wildlife that is thriving based on that, the plants that you choose. It's going to be beneficial to the insects, and it's going to beautify the site. So you can create a rain garden that is absolutely stunning. Where are you going to begin? The site selection, if you'll look at that caption to the right, that's not a picture of me, but that's very similar to what my yard looked like after the first significant rains with my new property. I was shocked and amazed. And more than that, I was pretty frustrated. Once the Homeowners Association decided that the junipers that were thriving on that back hill, there were a few of them that were pretty old that needed to be trimmed out. They decided that they should take all of them and just remove them. They didn't pull them out by the roots, but they decided they should take all the living material off and just leave the roots. They thought that they were doing me a favor, me and all the other homeowners that live on this bank, a favor by leaving the roots, as if that was going to make any difference, as if leaving the roots was going to still allow for any absorption of any rain material. What ended up happening is, a little bit over time, mosquitoes started to breed in my swamp of a backyard, and I was absolutely horrified. So as a homeowner, I looked for a solution, and for me, it ended up happened to be some rain garden. So the site selection was, I need to look for a sunny spot where the water already collected. And for me, of course, it was pretty obvious. It was midway between the water source and for me was a low area in my yard. For some, it's going to be a storm drain. Of course, mine was downhill. So as you're selecting your site, you want to keep your rain garden downhill. And this diagram here shows the direction of the water flow. For me, that water was flowing some down from my house, from my roof, and from the elevation from my home, and it was going down towards the what I ended up making a berm from. So I ended up coming from the back of the house and from the back of the slope. So I needed to create a berm to ensure that the water would not run too far and create a gully. As you're preparing the site, you need to be able to determine where it's going to be the best site to put your rain garden. You're going to need to perform a soil drainage or a percolation test. The way you're going to do that is you're going to dig a 1 foot deep hole and fill that with water. You're going to need to determine how long it takes for that hole to fully drain. So as you fill that up with water, you're going to observe it over the next few days. You're going to repeat that test 3 times. Then you're going to determine what is the longest draining time as you're doing that percolation test. If it takes more than 3 days for that site to drain, that site is not suitable for a standard rain garden. It's possibly suitable for a wetland or a bog garden, which we're not going to talk about today, but it's definitely not suitable for a standard rain garden. I'll have some resources at the very end that can tell you a little bit more about calculations. We're going to talk about some today, but here's some general information we'll have some general information about how to calculate the size of your rain garden. Some issues that you want to avoid as you're building and siting your rain garden. You want to build your rain garden at least 10 feet from gas and power lines. Critical information. You don't want to dig and hit something you don't want to hit. So you want to call 811. That's the North Carolina call before you dig number. You want to give them a call and give them plenty of time to come out. They usually come out within 24 to 48 hours. They'll come out and tell you where the gas and power lines are between your front yard and the curb. Now, I did not find that they would come out and tell me what was happening in my backyard. I had to do a little experimentation on my own. And please do call them, give them playtime to come out and investigate. Do yourself a big favor. When I started digging in my backyard, I had to consider and locate all the cable, internet, phone, FiOS service providers because they were not located or not specified in my backyard where I needed to dig. So I have found every cable, every wire. I can tell you where they are in my backyard. And I pretty much tell you where they are and where they're leading to in most of my neighbors' backyards as well. So be very, very careful with that. You don't want to cut out your neighbor's cable, their phone, their internet. I'm telling you, it would get really ugly. And I ran across several wires that I almost cut into. So be very, very careful. The next thing, so that caption to the right is showing a wire that someone, I think, kind of ran into. You want to avoid. Something very, very, very important. You want to make sure to locate your rain garden at least 25 feet from septic. No kidding, that's a really big deal. You don't want to run into a septic field. That would be so bad. You also want to be very friendly. You don't want to redirect your runoff to your neighbor's lot. That's dirty stuff. So my neighbor and I, he actually is having such a problem with the runoff that he is having a French drain built. That French drain is running from basically almost a neighboring wall to me to the back of our property to the very front of his yard over down to the street and to the drainage so that it can drain out into the city drainage. So be very careful and very considerate of your neighbor. My neighbor is having such a terrible runoff problem that is affecting his foundation. He said he woke up one day and heard crack, crack, crack. It sounded like there were pictures that were falling from the wall, but it was actually his foundation sinking and the walls, the taping of his drywall cracking across one side of the whole side of his house. So it can be a really, really terrible problem for people facing runoff problems. Be very friendly and don't redirect your runoff to your neighbor's lot. How are you going to size your rain garden? And you can see this property here to the right has a lot of surface area for their roof. They have a very large circular driveway, and they have created a rain garden that is beautiful. You're going to manage that rainfall. You'll create a rain garden that's large enough to manage rainfall, and it can compensate for up to 90 to 95% of the local impervious sites. And we talked about that being the roofs, the driveways, and the sidewalks. So you can see this is a lovely rain garden. You can see some drainage that's a large circle that's in the very middle there. I can't point to it in this photo, but you can see that in the very middle to try to manage all of these impervious areas. So considerations as you're sizing yours, you need to look at what is your available space. And your available space might not be large enough to handle everything you want, considering what is already planted in your yard. I have a very, very large willow oak that's in my backyard, and the roots run very wide. It's a 30-year-old oak. It is beautiful, but it certainly wasn't enough to soak up all the water that was running off into my backyard. So you have to consider what is your available space. You also need to consider the total area of the impervious surface. So what are you working with? And you also need to consider the soil type. Let's talk about measuring that impervious surface area. So you need to measure that surface area length and width to determine the feet. So you're going to measure the length possibly of your roof. For an example, the length and width of the roof that's going to be draining into that area. For me specifically, I needed to measure the part of the roof that was going to be draining into my backyard. My roof is not a flat roof. Of course, it's a pitched roof. Part of it's draining to the front, part of it's draining to the back. So I need to figure out how much was draining to the back of my yard. Then I'm going to multiply the length by the width for the total area to get the square feet. I did not have any areas that were draining into the back other than my roof. I did have a small patio, but it wasn't being impacted by the flooding. So I just took the roof area and did that and multiplied the length and the width and got the square feet. And then that was my total impervious surface area that was going to be directed in my rain garden. The size of the rain garden is calculated as a percentage of that surface area. It's based on that percolation test. So determining what type of soil that you had, how long it's going to take for that to drain. Your soil type, depending on that soil type, if you have sandy, well-drained soil, which I did not, the rain garden should be approximately 20% of the total impervious area. For me, I had poorly drained soil, not loamy, but poorly drained soil. My rain garden could be at least 30% of the impervious area, possibly up to 50%. Unfortunately for me, I had clay soil, not the lovely light brown clay soil. I had the deep, ugly clay soil. Got to the point when I was digging, I actually saw white. It was very ugly. The components of a rain garden. Here's a lovely rain garden. It's to the right. It looks like it's a perennial rain garden. It's a small one, and it's shaped in a kidney shape. You can find that often the shape of the rain garden is oval, kidney shape, sometimes teardrop, but you want to make it beautiful in your landscape. So there's a collection pond, that area that you're going to use to collect and to have most of the water draining into. You're going to use the amended soil. And for me, it was necessary for me to break up the clay or break up the soil, whatever soil that you do have, and amend that soil so you have soil that's good enough for your plant material to thrive in. You're going to have the berm and the weir. The berm is going to limit where the water flows. It's going to be the edging, and the weir is going to be the flat or lower elevation of the berm. That's going to allow the water to flow into. You're going to have rocks, a rock area, possibly to reinforce the berm if you need that, and also to beautify the rain garden. There's going to be your plant selection. And of course, you're going to have the mulch and ground cover to try to keep down the weeds. The last thing you want for that thing is to develop a bunch of weeds. Hate weeds. Here is a side view of the components of a rain garden, where we see that depression or the area that we're going to dig down into to create that rain garden. You have your amended filter bed where you're going to put your plants, and that's going to be the amended soil. You have the berm, the backstop of the garden. You're going to have your rocks, and the rocks are going to slow the water entering the garden. You're going to have the plant selection, tolerant of both flooding and long periods of drought. And then you're going to have the mulch. You can see that some of the plants an example of the plants that's maybe in the middle of this rain garden are cannas. Some of the ones at the edges are going to be some ground covers. Those in the middle are the ones that are going to be the most tolerant of wet feet. You're going to dig your rain garden, and to install it, you're going to dig to a depth of about 6 inches. You're going to use that soil that you remove to create a berm along the edges. And you're going to be, depending on the elevation, you're going to lower and flatten that berm for the weir to allow some of the water to come in, to drain in from the source of where the water is coming in the most. You're going to spread about 1 to 2 inches of amended soil on the bottom to make it suitable for the plants you're going to have to go in. And you're going to cover that with mulch or triple shredded bark. Again, to keep those weeds out. You see a team of people that is helping this homeowner. That's what you want if you can get it. It's a lot of digging. Here's another side view. You're going to select that plant material base to meet your zone. And of course, we're in zone 7B here in the triangle area. You want it to meet the sun and the water requirements. And so for my specific area, I had that oak that was on the right side of my yard that was taking up a great deal of my yard. But on the left side, it was all sun. And I wanted to maintain a sunny area of my yard. I didn't want to plant any trees that were going to eliminate the one sunny area of my backyard. I wanted to be able to grow flowers and other things in the area. So if I put another another tree there, another deciduous tree, it would completely eliminate my ability to grow any other flowers or anything that was going to produce the results that I wanted in the rest of my garden. Since part of my garden was a shade garden, I still wanted a sun garden. So select those plants they're gonna meet the goals you have for the rest of your garden as well. Plants that need less water, of course, are going to go along the edge of the berms, and your water-loving plants like cannas, river birches, etc., are going to go closer to the center. Here's a sample of a rain garden that's been planted. This you see in area 1, there's a small tree or a tree-formed shrub. To the left there in orange, you have 3 perennials or ornamental grasses that do beautifully in a rain garden. The area 3 has got 6 perennials or ground covers. Area 4 has got 3 perennials. Area 5, the top, has got 3 large perennials or ornamental grasses. And area 6 has 3 small shrubs. What are you going to plant? I definitely say that you might want to prefer natives. They're going to be less disease. They're going to be more disease tolerant. They're going to be better for wildlife in this area. They're going to grow better. They're going to be less invasive. So you won't have to worry about them being invasive. So I say that if you're looking for native plants, you can go and select your plants looking for in the North Carolina Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox. You select whatever is going to be beneficial for your garden. Some people prefer natives. I have all types of plants in mind. I selected at the time, I didn't really know so much about natives. And so I selected plants that liked wet feet. And pretty much that was my only major concern. I wanted to pick those plants that were going to be beautiful. I picked some that were going to be perennials. I selected some that were going to be evergreen. I selected those that were going to be deciduous. I laid them out so it'd be beautiful in my garden. But if you are specifically looking for native plants, I'm going to actually take a look-see at the end to look for those that are native, but select whatever makes you happy, whatever's going to work for your rain garden. But if you are specifically interested in native plants, go to the search box in the Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox, go to the search box and just put in the word native. And for the results, you're going to get a hashtag native gardens. There are 345 entries. For wildflowers, there are 288. There are 248 perennial entries, 169 tree entries, and 146 shrub entries. But as I said, select what works for your garden and whatever is going to make you happy. There are some slides that have some examples of what to plant. Perennials for sun is a Joe Pye weed. The bees love this stuff. They love it, love it, love it. The butterflies do as well. There's some examples of cutleaf coneflower, and anything that says swamp, grab it. If it's going to fit into your landscape, give it a try. Here's some additional perennials. Another swamp plant, a swamp hibiscus, swamp milkweed, beautiful plants. And this white turtlehead. Of course, that turtlehead comes in a pink as well. I think I've seen it in a yellow, but these are perennials that will do great in your rain garden. Toad lilies can be really appropriate. A cardinal flower will grow prolifically, and it's beautiful. It's tall. Brings that lovely red into your garden. It's great for something that goes really along the backside. That eastern blue star is lovely as well. That winterberry holly is a native that provides an alternative. It's going to give those lovely berries for wildlife in the wintertime. That Carolina sweet shrub, the scent is amazing. That American beautyberry, you cannot find a berry it's just stunning. It's absolutely stunning. I wish I had room in my garden for one. And I wish I had room for that sweet shrub. My lot is much smaller than the house we downsized from. And I had to be very selective of what I put in my backyard. The space was I just didn't have space for all of these selections. I wish I did. I wish I could have one of each. This Warren's red possum haw is a native. It's a native holly. Those beautiful red berries are great for wildlife. And the chokeberry is native as well. Here's a red swamp maple, beautiful red maple. River birches are fabulous for absorbing water. They will seek water. Those roots will run after the water. They're beautiful, beautiful specimen trees, and they have year-round interest. And this, you see, this is in the winter when it's lost its leaves. It still is a beautiful tree all year long. It's just gorgeous. I wanted to put one in my backyard, but I knew that it would block the leaves would take out all of the sunny area, so I couldn't put one. That would have been my first choice, but I just couldn't do it. Here's a laurel that's also called a water laurel. Some other perennials for the shade area. Now, not all of us have the ability to have our rain gardens in the full sun. If you decide to go ahead and use some plants that end up giving you more shade, Vinca minor or periwinkle, but you just have to watch that stuff because it can run and become somewhat invasive. Be really careful with if you decide to select that. Crested iris, some sedges can do really well as along the edges and ground cover. Juga is beautiful. My favorite is a chocolate chip. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful blooms on that. Liripe, there are natives if you prefer a native to that, but it is fabulous. It'll grow just about anywhere. And believe it or not, the rabbits still do eat that stuff. Nobody believes me, but the rabbits will eat it. That's another story altogether. There are additional perennials for shade. Of course, is gorgeous. This variegated sweet flag. And that cinnamon fern, I just wish I had room to grow the cinnamon fern. Beautiful, beautiful, tall, gorgeous plants. The shrubs for shade, you might try river oats and this Virginia sweet spire. Now, I actually have that specimen growing in the sun in my rain garden, and it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous during the spring. It has beautiful white blooms in the spring, and they're just everywhere. After they die back, it's a beautiful green plant, and in the fall, it turns this gorgeous red. So right now, mine are a little bit yellow, orange, red, but it can turn this beautiful, deep, deep red. Another plant or shrub for the shade might be the strawberry bush here or the mahonia. Trees for shade, you might want to try this American elderberry, this silky willow, or this gorgeous fringe tree. Another tree I'm envious I don't have room for in my garden. To maintain your rain garden, you just want to break up or remove any excess sediment if it does tend to settle in your grain garden. You don't have to fertilize it very often, but you do want to do a soil test every 2 to 3 years to determine if you need to add anything to help your plantings to thrive. You want to water them initially just to establish them, and then only in drought conditions do you want to water them after that. You want to prune them to encourage any dense shrub growth to create better water filtering, and replace mulch every 2 to 3 years. Actually, I replace mine a little bit more frequently than that. I probably replace them every 1.5 to 2 years. I like it to look pretty nice. There's some references here, and of course, the first one that we talked about was the North Carolina Extension Plat Toolbox. Here's a site for that one. There is a site on the NC State Extension Plant resources for native plants. If you'll go to this link, you can find those native plants if that's what you prefer. There's also the North Carolina Native Plant Society for those native plants. You can go to this link to get to that if you'd like to. Clemson University has a rain garden manual that you might find interesting. You can take a link to that. And the USDA has a garden site assessment card that kind of summarizes trying how to calculate and how to put together your rain garden in kind of a table format, if you'd like to take a look at that. There's also a rain garden in the South resource. It's ecologically designed gardens for drought, deluge, and everything in between, written by Helen Krause and Ann Spafford of NC State University. Of course, I mentioned I was with the Wake County Extension Master Gardeners, and we have office hours that we're available to answer questions for home gardeners between 9 and 12 and 1 to 4. You can also call at 919-250-1084 or email mgardner@wakegov.com. Thanks for your time and attention. Blake?
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. That was absolutely wonderful. We did have one question come in. Marilyn asks, how is a rain chain better than a gutter downspout in terms of managing water? She says she can see how it could reduce manager control, but she can't see how it could reduce manager control runoff. The only advantage, she says, would be that the downspouts sometimes clog.
Well, I tell you what, I would not select a rain chain unless because you do have to modify your gutter to do that. I could say that they are decorative and they're beautiful, but I don't believe they're better. Not at all. You do have to modify the ground underneath that rain chain and to make sure that there's proper drainage beneath it. So I think it's a lot more work than it's worth. They're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. But I put one that was just ornamental that I hung just for the sound of it. There's not any rain that's draining from it. It's just a lot of work.
Sure. That's good to consider. Yeah, because they are beautiful 100%. But is it worth the effort that you would have to put into it? It's a question we would all have to answer for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. Francis chimed in with a question. How do you handle mosquitoes? Do you use mosquito dunks?
Oh, actually, the breeding cycle for those mosquitoes is going to be about 24 hours. And because you have, because it's mulched, because there's plantings in the rain garden, it does not allow enough water to accumulate. It's going to take up most of that water, and it's not going to allow the mosquitoes to breed in there. So you don't have to worry about that. In areas that are accumulating a lot of water, like in ponds, et cetera, definitely use mosquito dunks. There's also a method to control mosquitoes using a mosquito death bucket. That's what it's called. A way that you take like a 5-gallon bucket, I can't remember exactly, but there's a way to create the bucket where you're going to put some fluid in the bottom, I believe, some water, some hay, or some straw on top of that, and definitely the mosquito dunks. So I'm a big proponent of mosquito dunks. I keep them handy all breeding season because mosquitoes, I think they say there's certain people that mosquitoes are attracted to. I am one of them. And so I'm absolutely paranoid about mosquitoes, and I keep my mosquito dunks handy.
No kidding. Awesome. Well, and thank you for giving us something to look up for ourselves. Mosquito death buckets. That'll be
look it up.
Certainly something I'm going to look into after this presentation. We got another question from Marilyn. She says, do you need an overflow provision for when you get a tropical deluge in your rain garden?
Overflow provision. Well, you have a berm that's going to help with the water collection. That berm is going to, at least for the area that you're collecting water, and that berm is going to keep the water from going too far past. And that it's going to be a raised area that's going to keep the water from going above a certain point. So that berm is to try to collect the water from keeping it from overflowing. If you need rocks to try to help with that, the rocks can kind of slow down the water from perfusing out of the area that you want to try to collect the water in. You want to try to build your rain garden large enough to collect as much water as possible. Sometimes it's just not possible to collect all the water, depending on your impervious area. You do the best you can. And one of the things that we need to consider was the space that you had available. My neighbor, for example, planted a bunch of perennials on his back lot to try to help soak up some of the water. It just wasn't enough. And rain gardens can be a really great solution, but rain barrels, do whatever you can, cisterns, whatever you have to try to help abate the problem. Sometimes a rain garden It can be wonderful, and sometimes it's just not going to be enough depending on the size of your property and the amount of impervious surface area you're trying to abate.
Yeah, definitely. And I would imagine that if you've designed your rain garden to deal with the everyday sort of amount of rain, every once in a while you're going to get a huge rain event. It's not really going to be able to handle it, but it's certain you may not have the room or the time to make it that it would be big enough to accommodate.
Yes, hopefully you can. Hopefully you can, but depending on the impervious area, you might not be able to accommodate it.
Yeah, for sure. Okie dokie. Well, that looks like that is all the questions that we've got in the chat for today. So thank you so much, Cynthia, for pulling this presentation for us together today.
Thanks, all.
It was wonderful. Absolutely. So much to learn, so much to think about, so much to consider for our own gardens moving forward. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this presentation today. If I'm not mistaken, this is the last Master Gardener presentation for the year, but presumably we will get more on the calendar for 2024. So be sure to check the J.C. Raulston's event calendar in the months up ahead as we beef up our programs for the following year. Thanks again for coming out this morning. We hope we'll see you around the garden real soon. Y'all take care.